The gavel echoed through the sterile courtroom like thunder, and 9-year-old Amara pressed herself deeper into the hard wooden bench. She watched her daddy stand tall in his pressed suit, his voice smooth as honey as he spoke to the judge about how much he loved her. But Amara's small hands trembled in her lap because she knew something the grown-ups didn't know yet. She knew her daddy was telling lies. Big, scary lies that made her stomach hurt and her heart pound so fast she thought it might jump right out of her chest. "Your Honor," Michael Davis said, adjusting his tie with practiced confidence, "I've been trying to reconnect with my daughter for months now. Her mother has been keeping Amara from me, filling her head with stories that simply aren't true." Denise Thompson felt her world crumbling around her. She sat behind the plaintiff's table, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. 3 years of single motherhood, 3 years of building a safe, loving home for Amara, and now her ex-husband was painting her as some kind of villain. The worst part was that Judge Holmes seemed to be buying every word. "Mr. Davis," the judge said, leaning forward with interest, "can you elaborate on these alleged stories?" Michael's lawyer, a sharp-dressed man named Robert Kane, stood up. "Your Honor, my client has documentation showing that Ms. Thompson has consistently refused visitation requests. She's also made several unfounded accusations about my client's character that we believe are attempts to alienate the child from her father." Denise's stomach dropped. She looked over at her own lawyer, Lisa Chin, who was frantically shuffling through papers. They had evidence too, but somehow Michael's side seemed more prepared, more convincing. How was this happening? "Furthermore," Michael continued, his voice taking on a hurt tone that Denise recognized from their marriage, "I believe Denise has been struggling financially and emotionally. I have stable employment, a new home, and I can provide Amara with opportunities her mother simply cannot offer." Amara watched her father speak, and memories flashed through her mind like a scary movie. She remembered the night 3 years ago when Mama packed their bags real quick while Daddy was at work. She remembered hiding in the closet when Daddy came home angry, throwing things and yelling words that made Mama cry. She remembered the bruise on Mama's arm that she tried to hide with long sleeves, even in the summer heat. But when she looked around the courtroom, everyone seemed to believe Daddy's words. The judge was nodding. Even some of the people in the back were looking at Mama like she was the bad one. Amara felt sick. "Your Honor," Denise's lawyer finally spoke up, "my client has been the primary caregiver for 3 years. She's maintained stable housing, employment at the Riverside Community Center where she coordinates youth programs, and has provided a loving, stable environment for Amara." Judge Holmes looked at the papers in front of her. "Ms. Thompson, I see here that you've had to move twice in the past year. That doesn't suggest stability." Denise's throat felt tight. "Your Honor, the first move was because my landlord sold the building. The second was to find a place closer to Amara's school and my mother, who helps with childcare. And yet," Attorney Kane interjected, "my client has owned his home for 2 years. He has a steady income as a warehouse supervisor, and he's completed anger management classes voluntarily to better himself as a father." Amara's eyes went wide. Anger management classes? She didn't know what those were exactly, but she knew Daddy still got angry. Just last month, when he picked her up for their supervised visit, he yelled at the man at the gas station so loud that Amara started crying. The supervisor from the court had to calm everyone down. The hearing had been going on for 2 hours, and Amara was getting restless. But more than that, she was getting scared. Really scared. Because it sounded like the judge was starting to believe that Daddy should take her away from Mama. "Mr. Davis," Judge Holmes said, "what are your specific requests regarding custody?" Michael straightened his shoulders. "Your Honor, I believe joint custody would be in Amara's best interest, with primary residence with me during the school year. Denise could have her summers and alternate holidays." Denise felt like she couldn't breathe. Primary custody to Michael? After everything that happened? After the reason they left in the first place? "Your Honor," Lisa Chin stood up quickly, "we strongly object to this arrangement. Ms. Thompson has been the stable, consistent parent in Amara's life. To disrupt that now would be detrimental to the child's well-being." "Ms. Chin," the judge replied with a slight edge to her voice, "I'm seeing a pattern here of Ms. Thompson making decisions unilaterally about this child's life. Moving without consultation, limiting visitation, making serious accusations without substantial proof." Amara looked at her mama and saw tears starting to form in her eyes. Mama was trying so hard to be strong, but Amara could see she was scared too. That's when Amara made a decision that would change everything. She stood up from her seat in the gallery. "Excuse me," Amara said in her small voice. The entire courtroom turned to look at her. Judge Holmes raised her eyebrows. "Young lady, please sit down. This is not the time." But I have something important to say, Amara said, her voice getting a little stronger. About my daddy. Michael's face went pale. Amara, sweetheart, why don't you come sit by Daddy? We can talk about this later. But Amara shook her head. She looked right at Judge Holmes with the kind of serious expression that only children can have when they're about to tell the truth about something really important. Your Honor, Amara said, using the word she'd heard the lawyers use, my daddy is lying. The courtroom went completely silent. Judge Holmes stared at the little girl for a long moment. Attorney Kane started to object, but the judge held up her hand. What do you mean by that, Amara? Judge Holmes asked gently. Amara took a deep breath. She looked at her mama, who was crying now, and then at her daddy, who was shaking his head at her like he used to do when he wanted her to keep secrets. He said he took those anger management classes, but he didn't. He said he wants to take care of me, but he doesn't really. And he said mama keeps me away from him on purpose, but that's not true either. Michael stood up abruptly. Your Honor, this child has clearly been coached. Mr. Davis, please sit down, Judge Holmes said firmly. She looked back at Amara. Can you tell me more about what you mean? Amara nodded. Last month, when the court lady was supposed to watch us, Daddy told her he had to go to the bathroom. But he really went outside to smoke and talk on his phone really loud to someone about how he was going to show that judge who the better parent is. He was using bad words and throwing his cigarette at a cat. The court supervisor, who had been sitting quietly in the back, suddenly looked very uncomfortable. And, Amara continued, her voice getting stronger as she spoke, when we were at the park he kept checking his phone instead of playing with me. Then he got a call and started yelling at someone about money. He forgot I was there and left me on the swings by myself. A nice lady had to help me find him. Michael was frantically whispering to his lawyer, but Judge Holmes was focused entirely on Amara now. Amara, the judge said carefully, these are very serious things you're telling me. Are you sure about what you saw and heard? Amara nodded solemnly. Yes, ma'am. I have a really good memory. Mama says it's because I'm smart. And I remember other things too. From before we moved away. The judge leaned back in her chair, and suddenly the whole courtroom felt different. The confidence that had been radiating from Michael's side of the room was gone, replaced by something that felt like panic. Denise was staring at her daughter with a mixture of pride and terror. She had always taught Amara to tell the truth, but she never imagined her 9-year-old would have to do it in a courtroom, with her future hanging in the balance. Your Honor, Attorney Kane said quickly, this child is clearly confused and has been influenced by... Mr. Kane, Judge Holmes interrupted, I think we need to hear what Amara has to say. In my chambers. Privately. As the judge stood up, Michael called out desperately, Amara, baby, you don't have to do this. Daddy loves you. We can go get ice cream after this just like we used to. But Amara just looked at him with those wise, sad eyes that children get when they've seen too much too soon. Daddy, she said quietly, you never took me for ice cream. You promised but you never did. Just like you promised you wouldn't hurt Mama anymore, but you did anyway. The courtroom erupted in whispers, and Judge Holmes banged her gavel hard. We're going into recess, she announced. Amara, would you come with me, please? And I want to see both attorneys in my chambers in 10 minutes. As the little girl walked toward the judge's chambers, holding her head high despite her trembling hands, Denise felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time in months, she felt like maybe, just maybe, the truth was finally going to come out. But she also knew that whatever happened next would change all of their lives forever. The question was, would her brave little girl's words be enough to keep them together, or would this be the beginning of an even bigger fight? Michael was pacing behind his attorney's table, his careful composure finally cracking. And in that moment, Denise saw the man she remembered from their worst days together, angry, desperate, and dangerous. The bailiff was keeping a close eye on Michael now, and Denise realized that Amara's courage had done something else. It had shown everyone in that room who Michael Davis really was. Judge Patricia Holmes had been on the family court bench for 15 years, and she thought she'd heard everything. But as she sat across from 9-year-old Amara Thompson in her private chambers, something about this case was making her reconsider everything she thought she knew. Amara, Judge Holmes said gently, removing her black robe and sitting in a regular chair instead of behind her big desk, I want you to know that you're very brave for speaking up today. But I also want you to understand that this is a very important conversation we're about to have. Amara sat in the big leather chair with her feet dangling, but her back was straight and her eyes were clear. I know it's important, Judge Holmes. That's why I had to say something. Even though it scared me. The judge smiled softly. In her years on the bench, she'd learned to read children pretty well. Some were coached by bitter parents, some were confused, and some were afraid to speak. But occasionally she met a child like Amara, one who had seen too much but still had the courage to tell the truth. "Tell me about the night you and your mother left your father's house," Judge Holmes said. Amara took a deep breath. "It was 3 years ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday. Daddy came home from work really mad about something. He was yelling at Mama in the kitchen while I was supposed to be sleeping. But I got scared and went to hide in my closet." "What did you hear him yelling about?" "Money mostly. And he kept saying Mama was stupid and worthless. He used really bad words that I'm not supposed to say." Amara's voice got quieter. "Then I heard something crash like a plate breaking. And Mama started crying." Judge Holmes made notes on her legal pad. "What happened next?" "I peeked out of my closet and I saw Daddy grab Mama's arm real hard. She said, 'Michael, please, you're hurting me,' but he didn't let go. He pushed her against the refrigerator and kept yelling in her face." The judge's pen stopped moving. "Amara, are you certain about what you saw?" "Yes, ma'am. I was so scared but I couldn't stop looking. Then Daddy saw me standing there and his face got even madder. He pointed at me and yelled for me to get back to bed right now, or I'd be in big trouble." "Did he hurt you that night?" Amara shook her head. "No, ma'am. But when I went back to my room, I heard more yelling and more things breaking. I pulled my covers over my head, but I could still hear everything." Judge Holmes set down her pen and looked directly at Amara. "What happened the next morning?" "Daddy was gone to work and Mama had a big purple bruise on her arm. She was crying while she made my breakfast, but when she saw me looking, she tried to smile and said everything was fine. But it wasn't fine." "How do you know?" "Because Mama started packing our clothes in garbage bags while I was eating my cereal. She kept looking at the clock in the front door like she was scared Daddy would come back. Then she said we were going to stay with Grandma Beverly for a while." The judge nodded. "And you never went back to live with your father after that?" "No, ma'am. Mama got us our own apartment after a few weeks at Grandma's. She said we were going to be safe now and we didn't have to be scared anymore." Judge Holmes had heard hundreds of domestic violence cases, and Amara's account had the ring of truth that was hard to fake. The details were consistent, the emotions were genuine, and the child showed no signs of being coached. "Amara, when your father has visited with you over the past few months, has he ever talked to you about what to say in court?" Amara nodded immediately. "Yes, ma'am. Last time he said if anyone asked me about why we left, I should say that Mama just got scared for no reason. He said Mama makes up stories because she doesn't want him to be happy." "But you don't believe that?" "No, ma'am. Mama doesn't make up stories. She tells the truth even when it's hard. Like when she had to tell me we couldn't go to Disney World because we didn't have enough money. She could have made up an excuse, but she told me the truth." The judge was quiet for a moment. "Amara, do you love your father?" The question seemed to surprise the little girl. She thought about it carefully before answering. "I used to love him a lot. When I was little he would pick me up and spin me around and it made me laugh. But then he started getting mad all the time and I got scared of him." "Are you scared of him now?" "Sometimes. When his voice gets loud or when his face gets that angry look, I remember that night when Mama got hurt. And I remember how scared I felt." Judge Holmes made more notes. "What about your mother? How do you feel about living with her?" Amara's whole face lit up. "Mama is the best mama in the whole world. She works really hard at the community center helping other kids, but she always has time for me. She helps." Judge Holmes looked at him with steel in her eyes. "Mr. Kane, that 9-year-old child just gave me the most coherent, detailed, and credible testimony I've heard in this courtroom in months. If your client has been less than truthful about his qualifications and behavior, now would be the time to address that." Lisa Chin felt a surge of hope for the first time since the case began. But she also knew that Michael Davis was not going to give up without a fight, and desperate people sometimes did dangerous things. As they prepared to return to the courtroom, none of them could have predicted what Michael's reaction would be to having his lies exposed by his own daughter. The courtroom felt different when everyone returned from recess. Michael Davis sat rigidly at his table, his jaw clenched so tight that his lawyer kept glancing at him nervously. Denise could see the angry flush creeping up Michael's neck, and it sent a chill down her spine. She knew that look. It was the same expression he'd worn 3 years ago on their last night together. Amara walked back to her seat next to Grandma Beverly, who wrapped her arm around the little girl protectively. Several people in the gallery were looking at Amara with newfound respect, but Michael's stare felt different. It felt dangerous. "Mr. Davis," Judge Holmes said as she took her seat, "I'd like to clarify some points about your previous testimony. You stated that you completed anger management classes. Can you provide documentation of completion, including dates and the certifying organization? Robert Kane stood up quickly. Your Honor, we have the certificates right here in our file. I'd like independent verification. The name of the organization, their contact information, and proof that they are licensed to provide such certification in this state. Michael whispered frantically to his lawyer, who was shuffling through papers with increasing desperation. Your Honor, we may need some time to gather that specific information. You may need time or you don't have it? Judge Holmes asked pointedly. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of papers rustling. Finally, Robert Kane cleared his throat. Your Honor, it appears there may be some administrative issues with the documentation. What kind of administrative issues, Mr. Kane? Michael suddenly stood up, pushing his chair back so hard it nearly fell over. This is ridiculous. You're going to take the word of a confused child over a grown man? I'm her father. I have rights. Mr. Davis, Judge Holmes said sharply, please sit down and lower your voice. But Michael was past the point of controlling himself. 3 years of planning and preparation were falling apart because of his 9-year-old daughter's honesty, and the rage that he'd worked so hard to hide was pouring out. She's been poisoned against me, he shouted, pointing at Denise. Her mother filled her head with lies. Amara doesn't know what she's talking about. Daddy, please don't yell, Amara said quietly from her seat, but her small voice seemed to make Michael even angrier. Don't you daddy me? After what you just did. I came here to give you a good home, and you stabbed me in the back with lies. The bailiff stepped forward, and Judge Holmes was reaching for her gavel, but Grandma Beverly had heard enough. Michael Davis, she said, standing up with all the authority of a woman who had raised 5 children and seen too much nonsense in her 58 years, you look at yourself right now. Look at what you're doing. You're screaming at a 9-year-old child in a courtroom because she told the truth about you. Mrs. Thompson, please. Attorney Kane tried to intervene. No, Beverly continued, her voice carrying across the courtroom, this man is showing everyone exactly who he is. That baby didn't lie about anything. She just said what she saw with her own eyes. And instead of being ashamed of his behavior, he's trying to scare her into taking it back. Michael turned his fury toward Beverly. You stay out of this, old woman. This is between me and my family. That child is my family, Beverly shot back. And I've been watching you try to intimidate my daughter and granddaughter for 3 years. Well, it stops today. Denise was crying now, but not from sadness. She was crying from relief and gratitude. For 3 years she'd felt alone in her fight to protect Amara. But now, sitting in this courtroom, she realized she wasn't alone at all. Her mother was fighting for them. Her daughter was fighting for them. And maybe, finally, the system was fighting for them too. That's enough. Judge Holmes banged her gavel hard enough to make everyone jump. Mr. Davis, you will sit down immediately, or you will be removed from this courtroom. Michael looked around wildly as if suddenly realizing where he was and what he'd just done. His outburst had revealed everything that Amara had tried to tell the judge about his anger and his inability to control himself. Your Honor, he said, trying to regain his composure, I apologize. This is just very emotional for me. I love my daughter and I... Mr. Davis, Judge Holmes interrupted, your behavior in the last 5 minutes has told me more about your character than all the paperwork in your file. Please sit down while I review the facts of this case. Lisa Chin could barely contain her relief. Michael's explosion had done more to support their case than hours of testimony could have accomplished. But she was also worried about what this meant for Denise and Amara's safety after the hearing. Judge Holmes looked down at her notes, then at Amara, who was sitting quietly next to her grandmother with tears in her eyes. The child had shown incredible bravery in speaking up, and she'd been rewarded by having her father scream at her in a room full of strangers. Based on the testimony I've heard today, both in open court and in chambers, I have serious concerns about Mr. Davis's fitness as a custodial parent, the judge began. Michael started to stand again, but his lawyer grabbed his arm and pulled him back down. The child in question has provided credible, detailed testimony about experiences of domestic violence in the home, as well as concerning behavior during supervised visitation. Mr. Davis's inability to provide proper documentation for his claimed anger management treatment, combined with his outburst in my courtroom today, supports the child's account. Denise felt her heart pounding. Was this really happening? Furthermore, Judge Holmes continued, I am troubled by what appears to be an attempt to manipulate this child into providing false testimony favorable to her father. A parent who truly loves their child does not ask them to lie, especially not about matters as serious as domestic violence. Michael was whispering urgently to his lawyer, who was shaking his head and looking defeated. However, the judge said, and Denise's heart sank, I want to be absolutely certain that my decision is based on verified facts rather than emotions, no matter how compelling the testimony. Judge Holmes looked directly at Michael. Mr. Davis, I am ordering a complete background investigation, including verification of your employment history, residence history, and any court records from other jurisdictions. I am also ordering a psychological evaluation to assess your fitness for any form of custody or visitation. Your Honor, Robert Kane said desperately, surely such extreme measures aren't necessary. Mr. Kane, your client just demonstrated in my courtroom exactly the kind of explosive anger that his daughter testified about. I would say these measures are not only necessary but overdue. The judge turned to Denise. Ms. Thompson, I am maintaining the current custody arrangement pending completion of these investigations. Mr. Davis's supervised visitation is suspended until further notice. Michael jumped to his feet again. You can't do this. She's my daughter. I have rights. Mr. Davis, you forfeited many of those rights when you chose to intimidate and potentially endanger a child. Your daughter, in fact. The bailiff was now standing directly behind Michael, ready to act if necessary. This hearing is adjourned pending completion of the ordered investigations. Ms. Thompson, please remain available for any additional questions. And I want security to escort Mr. Davis from the building. As the gavel came down, Denise felt Amara's small hand slip into hers. Her daughter looked up at her with those wise, tired eyes and whispered, Is it over, Mama? Are we safe now? Denise squeezed her daughter's hand and looked over at Michael, who was being led out of the courtroom by security. His face was twisted with rage and he was still muttering angrily to his lawyer. I think so, baby, Denise whispered back. I think we're finally safe. But even as she said the words, she couldn't shake the feeling that Michael's anger hadn't been satisfied by the judge's ruling. If anything, it had been made worse. And she knew from experience that Michael Davis didn't handle rejection well. Beverly leaned over and hugged both her daughter and granddaughter. That child just saved this whole family, she said quietly. Amara, you were the bravest little girl I have ever seen. Amara smiled for the first time all day. I was scared, Grandma. But Mama always says we have to be brave when someone needs our help. And Mama needed my help today. Lisa Chin approached their table with a smile. Denise, I have to tell you, in 15 years of family law, I have never seen a case turn around so completely. Amara's testimony was remarkable. What happens now? Denise asked. Now we wait for the investigations to be completed. But honestly, after what happened here today, I don't think Michael will be getting any kind of custody or visitation rights. His own behavior destroyed his case. As they gathered their things to leave the courtroom, Amara tugged on her mother's sleeve. Mama, I'm sorry I had to talk about sad things. But I couldn't let Daddy take me away from you. Denise knelt down and hugged her daughter tightly. You have nothing to be sorry for, baby. You told the truth, and that's always the right thing to do, even when it's scary. Are you proud of me? I have never been more proud of anyone in my entire life. As they walked out of the courthouse together, Denise felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years. Hope. Real, solid hope that they could build a future together without fear. But she also made a mental note to call the security company about upgrading their apartment's locks, just to be safe. Because she knew that while they had won this battle, Michael's reaction suggested that the war might not be over yet. 2 weeks after the hearing, Denise was trying to establish a new sense of normal for herself and Amara. The supervised visits with Michael had been suspended, which meant their weekends were their own again. But instead of feeling completely free, Denise found herself looking over her shoulder more often, checking locks twice, and feeling jumpy every time her phone rang. Amara, on the other hand, seemed lighter than she had in months. She was sleeping through the night again, her appetite was back, and her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, had called to say that her concentration in school had improved dramatically. Mama, Amara said one evening as they sat at their small kitchen table working on homework, do you think Daddy is still angry at me? Denise set down her coffee mug and looked at her daughter carefully. They had talked about the hearing several times, but this was the first time Amara had expressed worry about her father's reaction. Why do you ask, baby? I just keep thinking about how mad he looked when the policeman walked him out of the court. He looked at me like he was really, really mad. Denise reached across the table and took Amara's hand. Honey, your daddy's anger is not your fault. You told the truth and that was the right thing to do. If he's angry about that, that's his problem, not yours. But what if he tries to come here? What if he wants to yell at me again? He's not allowed to come here, remember? The judge said so. And we have new locks, and Grandma Beverly checks on us every day, and Mrs. Patterson next door knows to call the police if she sees Daddy anywhere near our building. Amara nodded, but Denise could see she was still worried. The truth was, Denise was worried too. Michael had always been unpredictable when his plans didn't work out, and losing the custody case so spectacularly had to have been a huge blow to his ego. The next morning, Lisa Chun called with an update on the investigations. "Denise, you're going to want to sit down for this," her lawyer said. "The background investigation has turned up some very interesting information about Michael." "What kind of information?" "Well, first of all, those anger management certificates were completely fake. The organization listed doesn't exist, and the signatures are forged. But that's actually the least of his problems." Denise felt her stomach drop. What else did they find? Michael has been arrested twice in the past 2 years. Once for public intoxication and disorderly conduct, and once for getting into a physical altercation with a coworker. Both incidents happened after your separation, which means he's actually gotten worse since you left, not better. Oh my God. How did his lawyer not know about this? That's the thing, his lawyer probably did know. The arrests happened in a different county, and they were hoping we wouldn't find them. But the court investigator was thorough. Denise sank into her kitchen chair. "Lisa, what if I had lost? What if the judge had given him custody and we didn't know about any of this?" That's exactly why Judge Holmes ordered the investigation. She knew something wasn't right about his story, especially after Amara's testimony and his outburst in court. "Is there more?" Lisa's voice got more serious. "Denise, there's something else." The investigator talked to Michael's current neighbors, and apparently there have been complaints about loud arguments and what sounded like things being thrown around in his apartment. The police were called twice, but both times it was just noise complaints, so no arrests were made. Denise felt sick. "So he's been doing the same things he used to do to me but to someone else?" "It looks that way." The investigator is trying to identify who else might be living there, but Michael hasn't been cooperative with any of their requests for information. After Lisa hung up, Denise sat at her kitchen table trying to process everything. She had known Michael was violent and angry, but somehow hearing that he'd gotten worse instead of better made her feel even more grateful that she'd found the courage to leave when she did. That afternoon, when Amara came home from school, she found her mother sitting at the same spot at the kitchen table, staring out the window. "Mama, are you okay? You look sad." Denise pulled herself back to the present and smiled at her daughter. "I'm okay, baby. Just thinking about grown-up stuff. How was school today?" "It was good. Mrs. Rodriguez said I'm reading at a 6th grade level now. And Tommy Peterson asked me to be his partner for the science fair project." "That's wonderful, honey. What do you want to do your project on?" "I want to do something about how telling the truth can change things. Like, maybe I could interview people about times when being honest made a big difference." Denise felt her heart swell with pride. Even after everything they'd been through, Amara was focused on positive lessons and helping others. "I think that's a perfect project for you, sweetheart." 3 days later, Denise got a call that changed everything. It was Detective Maria Santos from the county sheriff's office. "Miss Thompson, I'm calling about your ex-husband, Michael Davis. Are you available to talk?" Denise's blood went cold. "What happened? Is Amara safe?" "She's at school, but—" "Miss Thompson, please calm down. Your daughter is fine. This is about something else entirely. We have Mr. Davis in custody, and we need to ask you some questions about your relationship with him." "In custody? For what?" "He was arrested last night for domestic violence and assault. The victim was his current girlfriend, and she told us that Mr. Davis had mentioned you and your daughter several times during their relationship. We're trying to establish a pattern of behavior." Denise sat down hard. "Is she okay? The girlfriend?" "She's in the hospital, but she'll recover. Miss Thompson, she told us that Mr. Davis became increasingly agitated after losing a court case 2 weeks ago. He apparently told her that his ex-wife had turned his daughter against him and that he was going to make sure you both paid for it." The room started spinning. "He threatened us?" "Not directly, but he made statements that concerned us enough to want to talk to you. Can you come down to the station this afternoon?" Denise called her mother to pick up Amara from school, then drove to the sheriff's office with shaking hands. Detective Santos was a kind woman in her 40s who reminded Denise a little of her mother. No nonsense but compassionate. "Miss Thompson, thank you for coming in. I want you to know that this conversation is primarily for our investigation into Mr. Davis's current charges, But I also want to make sure you and your daughter are safe. What exactly did his girlfriend tell you? Detective Santos opened a folder. Her name is Jennifer Walsh. She's been dating Mr. Davis for about 8 months. According to her statement, he became increasingly violent and controlling over the past few weeks, especially after what she described as a custody hearing that went badly. Denise nodded. That would be our hearing 2 weeks ago. Ms. Walsh told us that Mr. Davis would drink and rant about how you had poisoned his daughter against him. He apparently became obsessed with the idea that you and Amara had conspired to make him look bad in court. Detective, my daughter told the truth about what she experienced. That's all. I believe you, Miss Thompson. But what concerns us is that Mr. Davis told Ms. Walsh he was going to teach both of them a lesson they'd never forget. When she asked what he meant, he said you and your daughter needed to understand that there were consequences for crossing him. Denise felt like she couldn't breathe. Are you saying he was planning to hurt us? We don't know exactly what he was planning, but his behavior toward Ms. Walsh escalated dramatically. He beat her badly enough to require hospitalization, and during the attack he kept saying things like, "This is what happens to women who don't know their place." Detective Santos closed the folder and looked directly at Denise. Miss Thompson, based on what we know about domestic violence patterns and given Mr. Davis's statements about you and your daughter, I strongly recommend that you consider relocating temporarily while we sort this out. Relocate? But Amara's school, my job. I understand it's disruptive, but Mr. Davis made bail this morning. Denise felt the world tilt sideways. He's out? But you said he nearly killed his girlfriend. His lawyer argued that he wasn't a flight risk, and the judge set a high bail. Apparently, someone put up the money for him. Denise was trying to process this information when Detective Santos's phone rang. She answered it, and Denise watched her expression change from professional concern to alarm. Miss Thompson, the detective said as she hung up, we need to get you home right now. That was dispatch. Your neighbor called 911 because someone matching Mr. Davis's description has been seen in your apartment complex's parking lot for the past hour. As they rushed toward Detective Santos's patrol car, Denise's phone started ringing. It was Beverly. Mama? Denise answered breathlessly. Denise, honey, where are you? I'm at the school to pick up Amara, but they said you already called and had someone else come get her. Denise stopped running. What? Mama, I never called the school. I'm with the police right now. Who picked up Amara? There was a long pause and then Beverly's voice came back, shaky and afraid. Oh Lord. Denise, they said a man came with proper identification claiming to be her father. They said he had legal paperwork showing he had the right to pick her up. Detective Santos grabbed the phone from Denise's hand. Ma'am, this is Detective Santos with the county sheriff's office. I need you to stay exactly where you are and call 911 immediately. Tell them we have a possible child abduction in progress. Denise couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at the detective in horror. My baby, she whispered. He took my baby. Detective Santos was already on her radio, calling for backup and putting out an alert for Michael's vehicle. But Denise barely heard any of it. All she could think about was Amara, her brave little girl who had stood up in court and told the truth, now in the hands of a man who had just put another woman in the hospital and had sworn to make them both pay. Miss Thompson, Detective Santos said firmly, grabbing Denise by the shoulders, I need you to focus. Where would he take her? Does he have family out of state? Friends? Anywhere he might think he could hide. But Denise was remembering Michael's face in the courtroom when the bailiff led him away, and the cold, calculated anger in his eyes when he looked at Amara. This wasn't a desperate father trying to reconnect with his daughter. This was a man whose plans had been ruined by a 9-year-old's honesty, and he was going to make sure she understood the price of crossing him. Detective, Denise said, her voice stronger than she felt, Michael doesn't want custody of Amara. He wants revenge. And he's just figured out the perfect way to get it. The Amber Alert went out at 3:47 p.m. Child abduction Amara Thompson, age 9, African-American female, last seen with non-custodial father Michael Davis. Denise stared at her daughter's school photo on her phone screen and felt like her heart was being ripped out of her chest. Detective Santos had set up a command center at the police station, and the small room was buzzing with activity. Officers were checking traffic cameras, contacting Michael's known associates, and coordinating with neighboring counties. But it had been 4 hours since Amara was taken from school, and there had been no sightings of Michael's car. Denise, Beverly said, sitting beside her daughter and holding her hand tightly, that baby is smart. Remember how she handled herself in that courtroom? She's not going to let him hurt her without a fight. Denise wanted to believe her mother, but she kept thinking about Michael's girlfriend lying in the hospital and the rage she'd seen in Michael's eyes. He had never physically hurt Amara before, but then again, Amara had never publicly humiliated him in front of a judge either. "Ms. Thompson," Detective Santos approached with a tablet in her hand. "We've been monitoring Michael's phone and bank activity. He withdrew $500 in cash about an hour before he picked up Amara, and his phone went dead shortly after that. But we did get something from the school's security cameras." She showed Denise the footage of Michael walking into the elementary school office. He looked calm, professional, like any other parent picking up their child. But when Amara appeared in the frame, walking beside him toward the exit, Denise could see something in her daughter's body language that made her heart sink. "She knows something's wrong," Denise whispered. "Look at how she's walking. She always walks closer to people when she's scared." Detective Santos nodded. "We're also seeing from the parking lot footage that she got into his car willingly, which suggests he hasn't threatened her yet." "That's good news." "How is that good news?" "He has my daughter. Because it means she's not in immediate physical danger. If he wanted to hurt her right away, he wouldn't have bothered with the elaborate school pickup. He has some kind of plan." Lisa Chin arrived at the police station just as the sun was setting. "Denise, I came as soon as I heard. What can I do?" "The court gave him supervised visits," Denise said bitterly. "How was he able to just walk into her school and take her?" "Because technically the supervision order was suspended pending investigation, not revoked entirely. And schools don't always have access to the most current court orders. He probably showed them the old paperwork that gave him visitation rights." Detective Santos's radio crackled. "We've got a possible sighting," she announced to the room. "Gas station attendant in Millerville thinks he saw Michael's car about 2 hours ago. That's about 90 miles north of here." "Millerville?" Beverly repeated. "Isn't that where Michael's brother lives?" Denise sat up straighter. "David Davis. I forgot about him. They weren't close, but Michael mentioned him sometimes. Do you have contact information?" "No, but David works at the lumber mill up there. Michael always said his brother was the only person who understood him." Detective Santos was already making calls. Within minutes, they had David Davis's address and were coordinating with the Millerville Police Department. Meanwhile, in a small cabin about 20 miles outside Millerville, Amara was trying very hard not to show how scared she was. Her daddy had been acting strange ever since he picked her up from school. At first, he'd been almost too nice, buying her a candy bar and asking about her day. But as they drove further and further from home, his mood had changed. "Daddy," Amara said carefully, "when are we going back? Mama will be worried about me." Michael glanced at her in the rearview mirror. They had been driving for 3 hours, and his initial plan of taking Amara somewhere to teach her a lesson was becoming less clear in his mind. The rage that had driven him to the school was still there, but it was mixed now with something else. A recognition that he had just made his situation much, much worse. "Your mama isn't worried about you," he said, his voice harder than it had been earlier. "Your mama is probably celebrating that she finally got what she wanted, Amy, out of your life completely." "That's not true, Daddy. Mama always said she wanted me to have a daddy who loved me and was nice to me. She just wanted you to stop being angry all the time." Michael pulled the car over to the side of the empty country road and turned around to look at his daughter. "Amara, do you know what you did to me in that courtroom?" Amara's heart started beating faster. "I told the truth, Daddy. Mama always says we should tell the truth. Your truth cost me everything. My job found out about the court case and fired me. I lost my apartment because I can't pay rent. And now I'm probably going to jail because of what you said. Daddy, you're scaring me." Michael looked at his daughter's face and saw genuine fear there. For a moment, he remembered holding her as a baby, teaching her to ride a bicycle, reading her bedtime stories. But then he thought about sitting in that jail cell the night before, listening to other inmates laugh about how he'd been outsmarted by a 9-year-old. "Good," he said finally. "Maybe you should be scared. Maybe you should understand that actions have consequences." He started driving again and Amara pressed herself against the car door. They were in the middle of nowhere now, with trees on both sides of the road and no other cars in sight. She thought about her mama, probably crying and worried sick. She thought about Grandma Beverly and Mrs. Rodriguez at school and all the people who loved her and were probably looking for her right now. "Daddy," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "I know you're mad at me. But can we please call Mama and tell her I'm okay? She gets really scared when she doesn't know where I am. Your mama should have thought about that before she turned you against me." "She didn't turn me against you, Daddy. I remember things all by myself. Like how you used to throw things when you got mad and how you made Mama cry," and how I had to hide in my closet because I was scared. Michael slammed on the brakes so hard that Amara was thrown forward against her seatbelt. He turned around with fury in his eyes. You will not talk to me that way. I am your father. But instead of cowering, Amara looked right back at him with the same steady gaze she'd used in the courtroom. Being my father doesn't mean you get to hurt people, Daddy. Judge Holmes said so. She said parents are supposed to keep their children safe, not scare them. Judge Holmes doesn't know anything about being a parent. She knows more than you do, Amara said quietly. Because she knows that loving someone means you don't hurt them even when you're mad. Michael stared at his daughter in shock. 9 years old, and she was lecturing him about love and parenting. The worst part was that her words reminded him uncomfortably of things Denise used to say during their worst fights. He started driving again, but slower now. The sun was going down, and he realized he had no clear plan for what to do next. Taking Amara had seemed like the perfect way to show Denise and the court system that they couldn't just write him out of his daughter's life. But now, with police probably looking for them and his phone turned off, he was starting to understand that he had just made himself a fugitive. Back at the police station, Detective Santos received word that officers had found Michael's car parked behind David Davis's house, but the house was empty. David Davis left work early today, she told Denise. His supervisor said he got a phone call around 2 p.m. and seemed very agitated afterward. He asked for the rest of the week off. So they're together, Denise said. David is helping him. It looks that way. But we're checking all of David's known properties and hangouts. We'll find them. Beverly squeezed her daughter's hand. That little girl has been through worse than this and came out stronger. She'll find a way to get through this too. At the cabin, David Davis was pacing back and forth while Michael sat at the small kitchen table with his head in his hands. Mike, you've lost your mind, David was saying. Taking that kid from school? What were you thinking? I was thinking that my own daughter destroyed my life, and somebody needed to pay for it. She's 9 years old. She's a baby. She's old enough to lie in court. David stopped pacing and looked at his brother with disgust. She didn't lie, did she? Everything she said about you being angry and violent, that was all true. Michael looked up sharply. Whose side are you on? I'm on the side of not wanting to go to prison as an accessory to kidnapping. Mike, you need to take that little girl home right now before this gets any worse. From the cabin's small bedroom, Amara was listening to every word through the thin walls. She had been in the room for an hour, and Uncle David had left the door unlocked because he said she wasn't a prisoner. But she was too scared to try to run into the dark woods by herself. Now, hearing Uncle David tell her daddy to take her home, she felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe Uncle David would help her get back to Mama. She crept to the bedroom door and opened it quietly. The two men were still arguing in the kitchen, and neither of them noticed her small figure in the hallway. I can't take her back, Michael was saying. They'll arrest me the minute I show up. They're going to arrest you anyway. The only question is whether you're going to jail for kidnapping or for kidnapping and murder. I'm not going to murder anyone. Then what's your plan, Mike? Keep her here forever? Eventually, someone's going to find this place. Amara took a deep breath and stepped into the kitchen. Both men turned to look at her, and she saw something in Uncle David's eyes that looked like shame. Daddy, she said clearly, I want to go home now. Michael laughed bitterly. Just like that? You think you can just decide when this is over? I think I can ask my daddy to do the right thing, Amara replied. I think I can ask you to remember that you used to love me before you got so angry all the time. David looked back and forth between his brother and his niece, and something shifted in his expression. Mike, he said quietly, look at her. Really look at her. She's not your enemy. She's your little girl and she's scared. Michael did look at Amara then, and for the first time since the courtroom he saw her clearly. She was small and frightened, but she was trying to be brave. She looked exactly like Denise had looked when they first met, when Denise still believed that Michael could be a good man. Amara, he said slowly, what you said in that courtroom, about me being scary and angry. Do you really believe that's all I am? Amara thought about the question seriously, the way she thought about all important questions. No, Daddy. I remember when you used to read me stories and push me on the swings. I remember when you taught me to tie my shoes. But I also remember being scared of you a lot. And today I've been scared of you all day. I never meant to scare you. But you did anyway, Amara said simply. And when someone tells you that you're scaring them, you're supposed to stop and try to be better. You're not supposed to get madder. David watched his brother's face crumple, and he knew the fight had gone out of him. Mike, he said gently, call the police. Turn yourself in. Take responsibility for what you've done and try to make it right. Michael looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw a strength and wisdom that humbled him. She had been through more trauma in her 9 years than many adults faced in a lifetime, and yet she was still trying to find good in him. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay." 2 hours later, police cars surrounded the cabin. Michael walked out with his hands up, and Amara ran straight into Detective Santos's arms. "Mama?" was the first word out of Amara's mouth. "She's waiting for you at the station, sweetheart. Are you hurt?" "No, ma'am. Just tired and hungry. And I want to go home." As Michael was led away in handcuffs, he looked back at his daughter one more time. "Amara," he called out, "I'm sorry I scared you. You were right to tell the truth about me." Amara nodded solemnly. "I hope you can learn to be better, Daddy. I hope you can learn to not be so angry anymore." By the time they got back to the police station, it was after midnight. But Denise was still there, still waiting, still praying. When she saw Amara walk through those doors, alive and safe, she broke down completely. "Mama, don't cry," Amara said, hugging her mother tightly. "I'm okay. I was scared, but I remembered what you always tell me about being brave when someone needs help. And I think maybe Daddy needed help understanding that he was hurting people." Denise held her daughter and cried tears of relief, gratitude, and overwhelming pride. Her little girl had faced down her worst nightmare and still found compassion for the man who had terrorized them both. "I love you so much, baby girl. You are the strongest, bravest person I know." "I love you too, Mama. Can we go home now? I want to sleep in my own bed and have pancakes in the morning and go to school and tell Mrs. Rodriguez about my science fair project." As they walked out of the police station together, hand in hand, Denise realized that this was truly the end of their ordeal. Michael would be going to prison for kidnapping, and they would finally be free to build the life they deserved. "Mama," Amara said as they got into Beverly's car, "do you think telling the truth was worth all this trouble?" Denise looked at her daughter's face in the streetlight and saw hope, strength, and an unshakable sense of right and wrong. "Yes, baby. Telling the truth is always worth it. Even when it's scary, even when it's hard, even when people don't want to hear it. You saved us both by being brave enough to tell the truth." 6 months later, Amara's science fair project on How Truth Changes Lives won first place in her grade. She interviewed police officers, judges, teachers, and social workers about the importance of honesty in their work. But her most powerful interview was with her own mother, who talked about how one little girl's courage in a courtroom had saved their family. Michael was sentenced to 5 years in prison for kidnapping and violating court orders. He was also ordered to complete real anger management treatment and could only have supervised contact with Amara upon his release, and only if she wanted to see him. Denise got a promotion at the community center and was able to move them into a bigger apartment. Amara joined the debate team at school and developed a reputation for asking thoughtful questions and standing up for other kids who were being picked on. And every night, when Denise tucked her daughter into bed, she marveled at the extraordinary strength and wisdom contained in such a small person. Amara had shown her that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most powerful truths, and that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing the right thing even when you're afraid. Their story became a reminder that justice isn't always complicated or dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as a child finding the courage to say, "That's not true," and adults finding the wisdom to listen.